Let's talk about Wizard. So Wizard, the magazine, has been around, or was around, for 20 years, from 1991 to 2011. So over 20 years, this magazine was coming out. But for me personally, I remember it during the mid-90s when I really started getting into comic books at the time. And for those who don't know, Wizard, the magazine, you can see it's a pretty thick magazine. It's not like any type of magazine you might see today. Like, this is literally like almost like a small book. But it covered everything when it came to comics, toys. It even has a price guide for cards in here for that deal with Star Wars and Star Trek and Batman, all those things. So it literally covered everything when it came to nerd culture. The first thing that I loved about these magazines was just the cover art on the covers. So like with this one here, it has a fold out and just this awesome action photo. You got Spider-Man and Venom there. Just a fantastic, and almost all the covers are super cool like that. And then we have, the Superman one here, which we'll get into in a little bit. When in this magazine they're talking about when they tried changing the costume look for Superman. If you were to really go through and just read and take a look at everything inside the comic or this magazine, it would probably take you a few days. There is so much writing inside of this magazine. There's so much information, and it is just awesome. So like on the cover here, we have when they changed Superman's costume. So let's take a look at that article there. So like the main article of changing the costume of Superman is just not 1 page or 2 page or 3 page or 4 page. Like, you have a full on story about the changing of the costume. They took all these polls about what people thought at the time about, were they okay with them changing Superman's costume? What did they think about all the publishers changing the different costumes of the superheroes over the time? So just some really like in-depth writing on these topics. And there's just not like one story like that in here. Like here you have another one where they're interviewing one of the comic book writers, and it just goes on and on. Cool little advertisement with Wolverine there and on. So just really good writing. And the best part is the price guide stuff that they have in the back of these issues. And we'll get to the price guide here in a second. But like I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, like, this magazine is just not about comics. Like, there's so much about the toys that were going on at that time. Like I said, there's actually a little toy price guide as well. So literally it covered everything when it came to kind of that nerd culture with comics and toys and kind of everything in between here. Now, the toy price guide didn't cover like every single toy that was out there, but it did cover a good amount. So like here, right down there, we got the beginning of the Star Wars toys. You can see some of the prices there. This is back in, I think, 1997. So yeah, just awesome. Like, just to be able to have a price guide you could have in your hand to kind of get an idea of pricing, super cool. They also would talk about what would be happening on television or in the movies. And this is always super interesting because a lot of the times the stuff they'd be talking about never ended up coming to fruition at all. Like, here's an article about Michael Jai White, who played Spawn in the Spawn movie. So yeah. And as a collector of non-sports cards, having a price guide for these, also awesome. And just to kind of be able to go back into the past and see some of the prices for these cards. And man, I wish I could go back in time, because obviously here's the Star Wars cards from 1977, which I have made a ton of videos on, and you can see just how cheap everything was back then. in this section of the magazine, I always find super interesting. It's the top 10 comics. And like, if you go through this list, like, I love comics. I have a little bit of knowledge when it comes to comics. I'm not like some people out there, but like, I have never heard of Witchblade or Dark Child. Obviously I know Justice League of America and Fantastic Four. Never heard of Hitman. Astro City, never heard of, or Kingdom Come. So it's just super interesting to see. I've obviously heard of Preacher, but like, it's just super interesting to see what was like kind of popular during that time period. And then you have another list. You have the Wizard Top 100 there, in which kind of goes over the top, says the highest ordered comic books from the month of January. So that's from a couple months before when this magazine came out. But you can kind of just see like just so much knowledge and information inside of this Wizard magazine. And then at the very back of the magazine, you have finally you have the comic book price guide, which was the best part, obviously, of it. And it's just so cool to kind of be able to go back into the past and kind of see what some of these comic books were selling for. Like, for example, let's see here. There's Amazing Fantasy, the very first issue of Spider-Man, back in, I think this is 1997, selling for $24,250. A lot of money for back then, but man, is it selling for way more these days. And how about Detective Comics #1? $65,000. And they love some lists, because at the very, very back of the magazine, we have top 10 heroes and villains of the month. Wolverine, Spawn, Fairchild, Dark Claw, Spider-Man, Magneto, one of my personal favorites, Rogue, there's Witchblade again, X-Man, and Blank. So, yeah. Now, I picked up both of these Wizard magazines for 50 cents at my local comic book store. I have picked some of these older issues up for $1. At a recent comic book convention I was at, they were selling them for $10 a piece, but those were brand new. They still had the poly bag around it, because some of these came with like cards at the time. So you're looking at anywhere from the cheap end to 50 cents to $1 to, if like they're still like in their little poly bags, up to $10. But I'm telling you, if you have never bought one before, buy one. And for all those people out there who remember it, it is well worth it to at least have a couple of these on hand at your house, just be able to kind of go back through. They are so much fun. I would say don't buy magazines now these days, but if the Wizard magazine ever came back, I would be not only buying it, I would make sure I had a subscription to it, because this magazine was awesome. I'd love to hear what you all think in the comments below.